My name is Pete, and welcome to my garage. Welcome back to Pete's Garage, where today we have a 2010 Cadillac Escalade that about a couple of months ago I put a motor in it, and we got a couple of issues that we need to fix. One, it's got a coolant leak, and it's not coming from the engine, so don't get me there. Let's just go see what we're looking at here. Alright, we got our coolant leak that we have here coming from the radiator. Also, you can see we have some coolant down here, kind of far down there, sitting and dripping off the skid plate. And over here on our side tank of our radiator, you can see here, and we have a slight little crack right up here on this side tank. You can see where the coolant's just been running down that plastic tank. So I got a new radiator. Okay, in order to get this radiator out, we're going to need to get a little bit of room. So first off, we're going to have to take this intake setup off, and that will give us a lot of room to get our fan out and everything, because our fan is attached to the front of it. So we can pop this up and you can slide it out. You almost have to slide it. Okay, right here we have our PCV connection. Sometimes on the early ones you can just slide it off the valve cover. Here there's a little tab you got to release. It's easier just to pop this out right here, but you got to be careful not to break this off. There's also a little clip right here for the upper radiator hose. I like these panel popper tools. You can pick these up at Harbor Freight for a whole set of these things for like 10 bucks. So they're a lifesaver to try to get some of this stuff off. You can pry that clip out of there. And for the hose clamps that hold this intake setup on, they're either an 8mm or 5/16, or you can use a flathead screwdriver in them, either way. We got to unplug our mass air meter to get it out of the way, and don't forget this connection later, but we'll just position it out of the way so we don't have to worry about it. Loosen up those hose clamps. And this one I can either loosen that hose clamp or I can just leave it on. And we'll lift this up over this stud here. And slide it off. And then we can also just lift up on this whole air box. Since I'm replacing the radiator, I can remove this hose also, and it gives me a lot more room. To remove these spring lock clamps, it does help to have a pair of these hose clamp pliers, where you can see on one side it's got almost a little hook like this, and the other side a little indentation to hold the hose. These make life a lot easier with these hose clamps. I like the spring lock hose clamps. I know a ton of people hate them and they want to throw them away and put worm gear clamps on. I can't stand worm gear clamps because they dig into the hose and everything, and they seem to leak too. As long as you get these back in the same position, you're good. All right, I'll position that out of the way. And my air box and air intake can be removed. As you can see, now we have a lot more room to work with right here. We do have some hoses on the top. We have our transmission cooler lines and our oil cooler lines. The good thing is we're replacing our oil cooler lines at the same time right now, so that's going to make life easier. But we got to get this upper radiator hose off of here. Now this just pops out. There's a little push pin right there, but usually it's pretty easy to get out. As soon as you start disconnecting some of these hoses, you're going to have some coolant leaking out. Luckily for me, this thing was a little low on coolant anyway because it's been leaking anyway. As you can see, we have some tranny cooler lines here that we're going to have to remove. You pull these, pull those off, and there's little clips right there. They do make a special tool that goes in there, so you don't have to remove the clip. I don't have one on me right now. Well, maybe I do. I'll have to look at my toolbox. I can't remember if I have one or not. We're going to have to remove the fans. So we're going to have to remove the 13mm bolts here. Don't get them confused with these, because I believe these are different. These are the radiator bolts. So we'll have to remove the fans. They're a lot easier to get off once you have these cooler lines off right here, so you don't have to fight getting them around the cooler lines. On this side, we have our upper radiator hose, and then we have our oil cooler lines right here. And it's just the same as the transmission cooler lines, except for these have bigger clips on them. And then there's also this one right here. It's easier to pop this this clip, not pull the whole thing out, but it is easier just to undo the whole the latch mechanism that holds it. So let's get our hose clamp off here. Now these hose clamp pliers are nice because if you're just trying to use a pair of channel locks, it's doable, but they're kind of a pain in the butt. And you can see these. That grabs right inside there. And this other grabs right there. And you can pull on them. And if you get these things just right, you can see there's an indentation of where it went. So you can release them. Sometimes they'll actually, this little latch will latch on there, and that's really nice because then you just have to take a screwdriver and unlatch them. But see right now, once this is off, it's probably going to leak. Oh yeah, I better get a bucket to try to catch all this. I will try to catch as much of this as I can, but we all know that's nearly impossible. So sometime around about 2003, GM got rid of the drain petcock on that, and man, when I was at the shop, I never actually used it. You just let it fly at the shop, but here at home, I don't like to make nearly as much of a mess as you do in the shop because you can just, it's my garage at home, so we'll pull that hose up and out of the way. And I got to get this smaller hose off down here, and that's even further down, so it's going to leak even more on this side. All right, if you zoom in right here, this little clip, we're just going to pop this guy off of here, and you don't want to lose them. They call them Jesus clips, and that's because they always go flying off, and you're like, oh, Jesus, where'd that go? So we'll remove that clip. We'll pop that out. You can either remove the 10 right there, or you can just pop this line up. We'll position that transmission cooler line up out of the way. And then there's another one further down. Once this thing stops peeing coolant, I'll get that one off. Same thing over here on the oil cooler lines. You can see they're called E-clips, I believe. Oops. Because if you hold it like that, it looks like an E. But we call them Jesus clips. All right, remove this clip right here. There we go. Yeah, it's hanging off. Fantastic. And these oil cooler lines just pop out. Now, once you do the lower oil cooler line, it's going to start leaking. Actually, it's already leaking a little oil from the top one, but the bottom one will really leak. You know, that whole gravity thing. And a job like this takes quite a bit of cleanup just because this thing's always dripping oil, coolant, everything everywhere, especially from these cooler lines. Let me get this lower one off. And yeah, again, also, even from Harbor Freight, I mean, you don't need the expensive clip tools and everything from everywhere. These little picks, you can buy a little set of picks, they're like $5. And you can either fight with a screwdriver and never get it off, or you can just spend a little bit on tools like this. Or you can spend the big bucks on Snap-on and all that, but really, you don't need to. Not for picks, at least. Now, other tools, definitely spend the money on. But a set of picks, I mean, it's crazy the prices some of these places want for a set of picks. And they look exactly like the ones that you can get Well, I had a Craftsman set of them that, I mean, it looked identical to the Matco ones that I had at one point. I think they were from the same manufacturer. Once you remove the little Jesus clip, these lines just pull straight out. They had a couple of different designs on the earlier ones, whether it was longer here or shorter. So whenever you get your new oil cooler lines, if it's an older model vehicle, make sure that you line up whether or not it has the longer or shorter ones and match it up on the ones that you get for a replacement. Because if you get the longer ones and you require the shorter ones, it won't sit all the way down into the fittings, and then it'll probably pop out, or you'll never get it in all the way, actually. And if you get the shorter ones and you require the longer ones, it might just leak around it because it doesn't actually seal on the correct spot. So just make sure you get the correct ones. We'll pop these out. Now, a lot of times this piece right here likes to break. You know, it just sits there and it hinges on these little pieces. It'll still go back together the way I have it. And really, the way it hinges together, you can see that's going to go in that slot. That goes in that slot, and then it'll latch down and we'll be good. Just try not to break it, but you need to undo this latch part in order to get it off. It's kind of a pain in the butt because you can get on this side with the screwdriver, but it actually latches on the inside. I actually just push it sideways in order to release it, and then it comes off. All right, so now my oil cooler lines are disconnected from the radiator here. Upper radiator hose. My other coolant lines are disconnected. I have one transmission cooler line, and then I have my lower radiator hose. When you pull this lower radiator hose off, it is going to leak. I mean, you're going to have a lot of coolant coming off. So we also have our connection for our fans here. You just got to push that and then pull the tab off. All right. Make sure that the seal that's in here stays with this and not staying up here, and sometimes they'll fall down. And try not to get any coolant in these things. There we go. See, my seal stayed in there. That's good. So we can now remove our fans. We just have to remove the 13 millimeter here, and the same over here, 13 millimeter, and these fans just pull straight up. Electric impacts, it's the second best invention to the wheel, I think. So it makes life real easy on these. Now, if you try to remove this fan assembly without removing the tranny cooler lines or this other coolant hose right there, that bleed pipe, it's a real pain in the butt. But if you have those removed, this just pulls up. Oh yeah. You also need to disconnect the tranny cooler line down here where it connects. Okay. Just pull up and it comes out. All right, at this point all I have left is the lower transmission cooler line and the lower radiator hose. And like I said, whenever we remove this lower radiator hose, it's all the coolant's coming out. So we better be ready for that and catch it, because it's going to make one heck of a mess. Okay, I got my big drain bucket underneath there. So hopefully I'll catch it all. So we'll remove this clip right here. I always put my finger around it, so hopefully it doesn't go flying. And we'll have tranny fluid go flying everywhere. Oh, there it comes. I like to tuck the lines back. Hopefully they'll stay out of my way. Now we got to get this radiator hose off. I'm pretty sure the angle that they put this at way over here was from the factory. Whenever they're putting all this together, they're able to go through this inner fender, and that's why it's off to the side like that. But with a tool like this with a little cable on it, you can get on that. I mean, you can get on with other stuff, but this just makes it easier. Oh, here comes the flood. Hell, I'm just going to leave this thing. You can lock these things, so I'm just going to leave that on there for the new radiator when I install it here in just a second. Back to my 13 millimeter. We got the 2 bolts on the top that hold this on. I've also raised this hood up and supported it. Usually it's like a lot lower. I did this mainly so we could get more light in here for the cameras, but it still you might not have that much room to work with the hood where it's normally at. But I don't think you don't have to do that for this job, but it makes it easier. All right, now we just push the radiator forward, and it should release from these rubber clamps, and it should be able to slide it upwards. Pretty easy. All right, right now would be a really good time to clean any leaves or debris or anything that sit in this, because if you don't get this thing cleaned out, this tray right here underneath, it will drip forever, even if you get it all cleaned up. So I'm going to wipe all that out and everything and spray it. Here we can get a better view of the crack. You can see this crack right here in the side tank. Bam, that's where our radiator was leaking from. Okay, so this is a Murray. All right, this is a Murray radiator, and typically when you have aftermarket radiators, you got to put all the fittings in and everything. And this one's actually nice. You know, it's already got the fittings for the tranny cooler. It's already got the grommets and everything. It even has little rubber insulators that mount at the bottom of the radiator. Oil cooler line fittings are already there. So this actually is looking pretty nice. If you see here, hopefully we can get enough angle, you can kind of see how the little tabs on the inside there hold. That's how they hold those cooler lines in there. And then there's a little seal on the inside of that seals those oil cooler lines. All in all, seems like a pretty nice radiator. All right, I'm gonna wipe out that trough down here so we can try to minimize drips after we're done, because definitely difficult to clean it afterwards because the radiator will be sitting there. Duh. All right, we can slide our new radiator in. Make sure it drops down into those holes, and then we can get our bolts in to hold it in. Just make sure your bolts line up. I've had one before where it actually was shifted the whole core of the radiator one time. And we couldn't figure out why we couldn't get the thing to fit. It was like an inch off. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And it was really hard to tell too. But only ever seen that once, and that was actually a factory radiator. It must have got dropped in shipping or when it was built or something. I don't know, it was weird. Alright. Now, make sure you leave the clips in those transmission cooler line and oil cooler line fittings, because whenever you put it together, all you got to do is push the cooler lines in there instead of having to try to get the clip on afterwards. So leave them in there. Then you just push it in and pull it out and make sure that it's in there good. Now, remember how I left the clamp pliers on this? It's already clamped for me. I just got to slide it on. And then all I got to do is release the pliers. And it should release the clip. Make sure it's on tight. Now, if you were worried, if you're going to replace your hoses, this would be a good time to do it. These actually still feel pretty good. They're not cracking or anything like that, so I think we're good there. And the lower tranny cooler line can go on. And hopefully you can see from the camera angle, but you can see this taper right there on those. And with that taper, these things just push in. You hear it click. All right, now that line is in. Now you want to make sure that this little cover goes all the way on. Now I can put the whole fan shroud in. Let's see as I lower the fans in, how they sit in here. You see the fan shroud sits in this little pocket right here. This little pocket right there, and then it bolts right there. And then we also need to hook our transmission cooler line back up into its slot right there. There we go. Got that one back in its spot. And just so you can see here, these just push in. You hear it click in there, and always give it a tug to make sure it's not going to pop out. Had it before where you think they're in, and then it pops out, and you're like, oh boy, good thing I checked it. Then we'll squeeze that in there. Make sure this goes on nice and tight. If they're old, then it might be a little brittle, so you got to be careful there. Okay. Yep, that one's on there good. Our coolant hose right here, our little air bleed basically, is going to hook up down here. See, right underneath that cooler line. These clamps are always kind of easy. You just slide the thing on. It seems to hold pretty good. And we'll hook that into there. I need to get my bolts in here for this fan shroud. Then I also need to plug my fans in. Make sure your seal's in the right spot. All right, you hear it click? Tighten those up. I mean, you don't have to hammer them too much, just get them tight. Okay, next I got to connect the oil cooler line. And so if you leave the clips in there, all you got to do, push the lines till they go in, voila. Clip those on. And then down below, kick that light on for you so you can see what I'm talking about. Down in this low one, same thing, you got to make sure they go in straight. And you can hear them clip in. There we go. Then we'll get this guy stuck back in there. Put it back the same way it originally was. Cool. We're clipped in. We're good there. Now we just have our upper radiator hose. Connects right there. We'll get our hose clamp pliers, and then we also have to make sure that goes into that hole right there. Make sure we clip that in there. Then when we get our intake on, we'll be good. All right. Now the secret to not having these clips leak, these clamps leak, is you got to put them in the exact same spot, which is easy enough. I don't know why people hate them. Now I just need to get the air intake on, and that's good. All right, here we go. Get our air box thrown back in. Come on, baby. There we go. All right, make sure you get your PCV pipe plugged back into the side. Don't forget to plug in your mass air meter. And this little piece goes back in underneath there. And this hose runs right over the top into the radiator there. Alright. We're good there. Now all I got to do is top off the coolant. By top it off, I mean fill it, because it's completely empty. So we got to fill it up with coolant, and this thing is ready to roll. Now my new radiator came with new clips, new Jesus clips. Save these in case you ever lose them. Okay, we are now in the home stretch here, where all we got left is to fill it up with coolant. And it's probably going to take at least 1 gallon, maybe 1.5 gallons of coolant plus 1.5 gallons of water. So I'm just going to start with dumping 1 gallon of coolant in it. And I'm pretty sure 1 gallon of water will get us pretty close to where we need to be. If you do a water pump on one of these, you're pretty much guaranteed 1 gallon of water and 1 gallon of coolant. The good thing is these things bleed out real easy because of the crossover on the top of the cylinder heads. Those steam ports make it real easy to bleed out. So on these, you pretty much just fill it up. You can hear the air burping out. Bloop, 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 bloop. All right, and start putting some water in there. And a little coolant for the finishing touch. Now in these, the level is right here, the cold level, and that's where I'm at right now. You can kind of see that. That's why I always like to finish it off with a little bit of Dexcool so you can see it, because if it's water, it's hard to see. We'll wait for the thermostat to open. It'll kind of mix some of this coolant up a little bit. You can still see it. You can see water and then coolant. It's hasn't quite mixed. While that's doing that, I'll get the cover on up here. On these covers, I like to squirt this with a little bit of WD or something. Just give that rub or something to make it slide a little better, because then it slides over these pegs a lot easier and it doesn't stick nearly as bad as when you're trying to take it off. This is just a little cover, so we don't. There we go. Drops right on. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button. If you would like to see more content like this, please hit subscribe, and I'll get more content up as soon as I can. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section. I'll answer them back.